there's two sides to every coin. Then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks. And some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fist at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown. 'Cause it's over the game, gonna crack down and shut down the sundown. I said it's all just a game.
Hey kids, happy Monday to you. Hope you are well. I know we're live right now, and that's such a fleeting thing. Most people are consuming on the bus.
You're good.
Hi again. Hey, listen, crap happens, man. It's a Monday. 2. Mondays are for this, but we've worked through it. We are here. I appreciate your patience, and we are back. We got lots to deal with on the day. By the way, I'm me, you are you. You know that. Welcome back to Just a Game. We are broadcasting live from Treaty 7 territory, and we are an inclusive program. Everybody's welcome here. And we are allies for all. Live in the Oodle Noodle studio. We don't talk enough about Oodle Noodle, and we don't talk enough about Ski Cellar Snowboard, because without them, holy cow. And we're going to be putting them to use here right away, because we will be talking some baseball. We are just over 24 hours away at the time of recording or live streaming from the Major League Baseball trade deadline. The Jays making a fairly significant deal yesterday for a hard-throwing reliever. We'll get into that with Zach Laing. Zach's going to join us from Blue Jays Nation. But a lot to cover between now and then. A busy weekend. The CFL and the Calgary Stampeders, boy, both having, I think, a very difficult weekend for different reasons. Stamps in Montreal. If not for Rennie Paradis, they would have been in real trouble. They end up losing the game. One of those yin and yang things. Didn't give up an offensive touchdown. Didn't score an offensive touchdown. I would ask you to make sure you check out Live from the 55 with Danny Austin. He's going to break down the Stamps and the CFL a heck of a lot better than I'm going to break them down. But it's not good. It's not. It right now is not a competitive team in the CFL when it comes
Rob,
to.
Sorry, we're not going.
Oh, okay. I can see 9 viewers. Keep adding viewers. That's cool. Okay. What's wrong now?
But I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, so the one thing I am kind of worried about is the link part. If you had to reset, I thought we had to restart and set up new links. Right? No? Okay, we're good. All right.
Good.
All right. We'll try this again. Part 3. For those who may or may not have heard this before, welcome to the show. I am me, you are you. It is Just a Game on a Monday, which feels more and more like a Monday. By the way, we are broadcasting live from Treaty 7 territory. I had a little smart brain fart there. We are an inclusive program. Everybody's welcome. We are going to talk to Zach Laing from the Blue Jays Nation in a little while. The Major League Baseball trade deadline, just over 24 hours away from right now at this time, when this time is now. August 1st at 4 o'clock Calgary time. The Jays making a deal yesterday, getting a hard-throwing reliever. So we'll talk to him. I know what I was talking. We were talking about the CFL and Stampeders. Bad weekend for both. Start with the CFL. We'll start with Stampeders first. Stamps drop one in Montreal. All the points coming from field goals. Rene's doing his job. I always defer in this case to Danny Austin and Live from the 55, which is out now. So if you are a CFL fan or a Stampeder fan and you want a much more complete and I think thorough and I would think balanced assessment. It was interesting that, Danny does this thing where he goes on social media and he says, well, I'm not going to live tweet the game because he's not there. Right. So 2 things that are not good for the CFL. The CFL's stat situation this year, which is, ridiculous, absolutely insane. And the fact that Post Media is not traveling reporters anymore to road games. It's not good. Like, all of this is contributing to some really tough news around the CFL, which still is full of good stories. It's still full of good athletes and still full of good people. And it is a sport worth watching and supporting, but it's getting harder and harder and harder to be serious about it when, it's harder and harder to find it. Stats wise and other things. Anyway, I'm distracted. But Danny was very protective, not protective, but he was saying, don't talk to me about the quarterback. Everybody's dumping on the quarterback. Okay. The good news is against Montreal, they didn't allow 300 yards offense. Montreal can put up offense. They didn't allow an offensive touchdown against. They didn't score an offensive touchdown for, and they gave up a pick 6. And right now, this team is going to come home and has got a really tough tough sets of games coming up. I believe a couple with Toronto, BC mixed in there. This one's probably going to get away on the Stamps, unfortunately. But the CFL continues to have a difficult weekend. I mentioned the stats and I mentioned, the media coverage, but boy, oh boy, oh boy, it's dire when people in Calgary are waxing sympathetically about the Edmonton Eskimos. The strength of the CFL in many ways was its golden age. And for me, the golden age was the 90s, 80s into the 90s. And both Alberta teams had a role to play in that. The dominant early 80s teams of the Eskimos that won 5 in a row. Growing up, you saw dynasty teams. And now we're in an era where we have to redefine what a dynasty is. We looked at the Patriots and said, well, they're a dynasty. When in the 80s we had the Eskimos, we had the Oilers, and then we'd have Jordan and the Bulls, and those were dynasties, multiples in a row. I mean, every year they were a threat to win. And the Eskimos, under Hugh Campbell were that. They were the Cadillac. Warren Moon went to the NFL and set records there after setting records here. And then into the 90s and the Stampeders quarterback factory, of Doug Flutie, of Jeff Garcia, of Dave Dickinson, of Henry Burris, all of these young quarterbacks coming through. Those were the golden age. Edmonton got blanked by BC at home. 21st consecutive loss at home. That's a pro sports record. I wonder, I don't think it will, but I wonder, City of Champions and all of that, and all the kidding aside and all the Battle of Alberta stuff aside, I'm just talking about branding and I'm talking about the league now. How much, 5 in a row really mattered for so long. Now, what about 21 in a row? I won't lie to you. I never lie to you. I tell you all the time I've got biases. I tell you all the time where I'm complicit in stuff. I tell you all the time where I'm working for this person, or I've done work for this person, or this person's important to me, or whatever. I don't like Chris Jones. I don't. Don't know the man from a hole in the ground. Just don't like the ethics. Don't like the way he operates. Just don't like a lot of things. And so on that part of it, this doesn't bother me. Where this bothers me is for Victor, the owner, or the president, I should say. He's come in and he's tried so many things. They had snowboarding in that stadium last winter. Snowboarding. Like the thing that he's identified, we got to get kids in here for free. They have 60,000 seats. So volume's not an issue for the Eskimos. But it's hard to be an Eskimo fan right now. And that's not a good look for the CFL. For most of my adult life, and I would say most of my even pre-adult life, the West Division was always the strength of this league. The Prairie teams were always the strength of this team. I'm not 100% sure you can look at Calgary and Edmonton as the strength of the CFL right now. I think that belongs to Winnipeg. We know how healthy, generally Regina is. BC's good on the field. They're trying really hard. I wouldn't say that they're the doormats. I wouldn't say they're the worst problems. They're middling. They're fair to middling. And how often have we talked about being in the middle is death? Being in the middle is death. So none of this is really born out of great knowledge or great insight. It's more born out of frustration. I wish for the Stampeders to be good. I was so used to the Stampeders being so good and so consistent. I have no problem with Dave Dick. This is not a leadership thing. This is a player personnel. Now in Dickinson's defense, he has called out his players for not being healthy. So I guess you have to deal with that. But I look up in Edmonton and I just, shake my head. I just shake my head. The league needs a healthy Edmonton. It needs a healthy Calgary. And I have concerns about attendance here, and I have concerns about the longevity of the league. But I can't broach that in just one day. And I can't broach it without expert opinion. So again, Danny Austin, live from 55. Many of us were asleep, or should have been asleep, or could have been asleep. Many of us got up and watched it, and were terribly disappointed today as Canada's run at the World Women's Cup in Australia came to a grinding halt. Defeated by the home side 4-0. Canada did pick up a win in their last game, a tough draw to start. They're the defending Olympic champions. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but the general feeling is that Christine Sinclair, speaking of Edmonton, I remember when it was a 15 or 16-year-old Christine Sinclair who burst onto the scenes at Commonwealth Stadium at the World Under-19 World Women's Cup, I believe, in the early 2000s. She set the world on fire, and she carried this country on her back long before Alphonso Davies. This might have been her last World Cup as a Canadian. Likely, she's 40. Maybe her last international. Who knows? That's up to her. She should play as long as she wants to play. She spoke afterwards. This is what leadership is. Look, we've been battling our federation for support, but I can't put this on the CSA. There are 23 players out there and staff. We didn't get it done tonight. I think more of it is like a wake-up call for our federation and the lack of a professional league, the lack of support for our youth national teams. I think you're just going to continue to see teams reach our level and surpass us, whatever you want to call it, if things don't change. She had every right to call out the Canadian Soccer or Soccer Canada. Every right. It's a mess. It's an abject failure of leadership. It is on every level. If you follow Rick Westhead on TSN, there's new reporting, new scandals breaking. This is a team that only months ago had threatened to strike to get support. It's had its budgets cut. It has single-handedly dragged this country from being an also-ran or just a non-factor in football around the world. It single-handedly dragged us into the fight. Yes, the men got to the World Cup in Qatar. Yes, they scored a goal. Yes, they didn't win a game. Yes. I get that. But they're back. And Canada, it should be able to stand on its own as a soccer nation. Yet again, we are plagued by corruption, by mismanagement, by failure of leadership. Management, managers, but failure of leadership. And it be ineffective and infantile and all the other I's or E's for me to not recognize that at the crux of this is the conundrum we have of exactly what Christine talked about in there. We need pathway to professional. We need our own league. We have it in the men's side with the CPL, but it's contributing to the problems we have now. We sold our soul to the devil. You can make that case. You can make the case that we sold our soul to the devil to get a men's league going so that we can qualify and host FIFA World Cup tournaments. Now we have a women's league coming, has nothing to do with the current structure, is outside of all of this. We'll have a team in Calgary in a couple of seasons. This needs to be solved. Christine Sinclair did what a leader did. She didn't point fingers. She made an assessment. She deserves better. It's a travesty. It's a crime in sport that Christine Sinclair is likely playing her last World Cup, and it ends like this. It ends in a fury of threats and legal actions and lawsuits and lawyers. And I have nothing against lawyers. Some of my friends are lawyers. It's a noble profession to be a barrister. But we live in a litigious society, and we spend too much time working on dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and not enough on making the sport better for our kids, making the sport with a future for our youth, giving young girls the opportunity to pursue their dreams, giving young men the opportunity to pursue their dreams. It's embarrassing that we're here today. I do not blame the team. And I know that the team says blame the team. I get that part. That's what leaders do. I get that part. I do not blame the team. But something has to change. Something has to change. So hopefully we'll get this all corrected. So you can't hear me or you can't hear me? Oh, that's Zach. Sorry. Zach can't. Okay. Sorry. That's not you. We're getting our guest set up. Okay. Perfect. Sorry. Good. Yeah. It's Monday. Mondays are fantastic. Good news, though, and we should always build you up. How about this? In their first season in Calgary, the Calgary Surge, speaking of self-disclosure, I work on the community side for the team. The CEBL team wins its regular season Western Conference Championship. The first time they've had conferences, and the first ever Western Conference champion is the Calgary Surge, who will now play host next Sunday to the winner of Friday's Edmonton in Winnipeg game. The Stingers, after losing here on Wednesday, go to Winnipeg and do their provincial rivals a solid by knocking off the Sea Bears. I'm ecstatic. I'm ecstatic. I hope that the building sells out. I hope that if you haven't come to a Surge game, that you rush right now, buy a ticket, be there. You're going to be impressed. You're going to have fun. All of those sort of things. I swear, I promise you that. Oh, by the way, if we're going to be completely, I should go back to the Cavalry. Cavalry did lose at home to Ottawa. Atletico 1-0. Last week I told you they were top of the table. Now they've slipped to third. It's just that tight at the top end. All right. Let's do this. Let's bring in our guest, brought to you, of course, by Ski Cellar Snowboard. SkiCellarSnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary. 4 locations in the winter. None open right now. None. But tomorrow is August. You know what that means? By Jerry Seinfeld math, it may as well be September. And if it's September, we may as well be going back out to the mountains. So get ready, kids, because I'm going to tell you right away, Ski Cellar Snowboard is going to be back open right away with the latest and greatest in everything you need, from clothing all the way up to bindings and boots and skis and snowboards and snow skating. We're gonna tell you about snow skating. That's going to be a lot of fun. Let's switch gears. Let's talk a little baseball, and something that I think is generally a little more positive. Very happy to join Zach Laing from Blue Jays Nation as the Toronto Blue Jays get set to open up a series against the AL leading Baltimore Orioles after playing Anaheim, losing last night or yesterday afternoon in 10. They went out, they acquire Jordan Hicks, reliever from St. Louis. So a lot around the Jays right now. And Zach, as we get into this, and we'll deal with the trade deadline here in a moment, I am fascinated by what the AL East has become. At the beginning of the year, Tampa Bay runs away and hides, except they get caught. And now it's Baltimore running away. The Jays are in the middle of this. But this has been, without Boston and New York at the top end, this has been one of the wilder AL East I remember in a long, long time.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on the show today, Rob. It has been an insane division to through this point of the year. As you mentioned, Tampa Bay had such a hot start and they've completely fizzled out. They were scoring at one point like 6 or 7 runs per game. I'm pretty sure through the month of July, they've scored like 3.5 at most right now. Baltimore surged, but I also have questions about them right now. Mm-hmm. They've got a number of starters who have career highs in innings pitched already. They looked at a guy like Tyler Wells, who they just optioned a double-A ball to give him a bit of a rest. That's not a great thing to be doing at this point in the season. They've got a ton of prospects in their system, but, the big question is for Baltimore right now, what do they want to do here, right? They could go out there and they could spend a bunch of prospects and pick up some starters that have some control or maybe some good higher end rental starters as well. But,
right.
Are they feeling like they're a team right now that's ready to quote unquote sell the farm for some success this year? Or are they going to look to kind of continue to build around their young core? Guys like Gunnar Henderson, they're still so young, right?
Well, Zach, I love it because this is exactly the kind of conversation RJ and I were having before we came onto the air. This to me is the great sports conundrum. Do you play the long game or do you go for it? And I think in the last 2 years, we saw Alex Anthopoulos push his chips to the middle a couple years ago with Atlanta and made a whole bunch of changes. We saw Philadelphia come from almost out of nowhere last year. I don't know how anybody resists the urge. I guess the last team to resist the urge, wouldn't that have been the Nationals when they shut down Strasburg? You know,
probably would have been. Yeah.
Right? Like, to me, if you get a chance, you go for it nowadays.
Yeah, I mean the window's so small for teams nowadays, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you even look at what's happened with like a team like the Mets this year, right? They spent so much damn money, and now they're trading Scherzer. Verlander's probably on his way out. The Dodgers make a ton of sense there, right? You look what's happening over in San Diego. How much money have they spent on guys like Juan Soto, etc.? And they're just scrapping and clawing along right now. So even for a smaller budget team like Baltimore, I think it's got to be pretty tempting to try and push your chips in, especially given the great start that they've had. And now that they're up on Tampa and Toronto, I mean, they're in a spot where, I think they should be going all in here.
Well, and that's what Texas is doing, right?
Yeah.
Like, Texas has gone out and acquired some bodies. They've been active. And even Anaheim, here we are. This is probably the longest Major League Baseball conversation in the history this year without somebody mentioning Shohei Ohtani. But for the longest time, Anaheim was that team, right? Like, what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? Well, they went out and got Grichuk and another bat from Colorado yesterday. Like, I don't know. I think with the third wild card team, I think if you're close, you let her buck. I think you have to.
I think you have to, especially when you look at how tight the AL's been all season, right? The Jays have been one of the best teams in the AL for the last 2 months, and Jays fans are sitting here being like, God, are we even going to make the playoffs this year? Yeah. Like, it's kind of crazy how tight it is as a whole, right? So, I think if you're a team that's on the cusp, you kind of got to push here.
So let's talk about the Jays. I mentioned before, they got Jordan Hicks from St. Louis yesterday. Addresses a need, especially with the Jordan Romano injury. But tell me a little bit about what Hicks brings to this team. And, I say it addresses a need. Does it address a need?
Addresses a huge need. I mean, you look at any team heading into the playoffs, and one thing that every team needs is a deep bullpen, right? If you are wanting to go all the way to the World Series, the Championship Series, you need a deep bullpen. And I think that's what the Jays have right now. They maybe have one of the deepest bullpens they've ever had as an organization here. The acquisition of Genesis Cabrera 10 days ago was a great one. He was on his way out of St. Louis. He had asked for a trade. They pretty much DFA'd him. And he came into Toronto. He's thrown 5 innings across 4 appearances, allowing 1 hit, no walks, no earned runs, fanning 5 batters. He's looked great. This Jordan Hicks acquisition is huge. Are the prospects the Jays giving up good? Yes, they absolutely are. But Jordan Hicks is the top bullpen arm of this trade market right now. And the Jays got him for a relatively good price, I think. I mean, the Jays we've seen have been really strong in developing prospects at every level through their system. So I don't think it's a massive loss for them. Right. Jordan Hicks, this is a guy 26 years old who's at the top of the game right now, right? There's been some concern. People are saying, well, he's got a high walk rate and stuff like that. But I think a lot of that kind of has to do with some struggles early on in the season, because over the last month or two, he's really kind of settled his game down. And he's a guy who can come in, and he's been the de facto one of 3 closers, I suppose, for the Cardinals this year. He's a guy that can come into Toronto. He can be an 8th or a 9th inning arm any day of the week, be able to help take some of that pressure off Jordan Romano, who, his back obviously hasn't been right since the All-Star game, which has been kind of tough to watch and see happen. But this is some tremendous insurance for what it was already been a good bullpen this season. So
you mentioned the age, which kind of boggles my mind. I guess I got that hockey mentality where I'm almost always thinking of rentals in that, that 28 to 32 range or whatever.
Yeah.
How much control do they have on him?
Jordan Hicks is UFA at the end of the year.
Okay.
So they have no control.
Okay.
Obviously, they can re-sign him at the end of the season.
Sure.
Right? Which I'm sure they'll try and do, because, this is a guy 26 years old in the prime of his career. He's throwing 103 mile per hour fastballs on a regular basis. This is a guy that I think the Jays will definitely want to try and keep around.
So that brings us to modern baseball. That was the first thing that I saw yesterday. Was everybody was? I think he has 3 of the top 5 clocked pitches this year.
Yeah,
he's almost got double 100 plus mile an hour pitches than the next guy in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
I mean, he is the hard. When you're looking for the hard throwing right hander, that's the hard throwing right hander.
Absolutely, it is. And
do you have concern? Is he healthy? I mean, does he stay healthy? Sorry, has he been able to stay healthy? Because that seems to be the modern baseball thing, right? We get the Nate Pearson. We're gonna throw. And now we get hurt. right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the inherent risk of anybody you're acquiring, any arm, anything like that, right? I mean, baseball is such a fickle sport. We see and hear stories of guys that throw their backs out on their way to baseball games on a consistent basis. Still,
Yep.
this sort of stuff can absolutely happen. But it does appear like Hicks has been pretty healthy through his career. He's going to be able to provide some great insurance and really help out in that pen. I'm really, really excited about this one. I think this was a great move by Ross Atkins and company here.
We don't say that a lot, do we?
You know what? We do and we don't, right? I think a lot of people have a sour taste in their mouth over the Mitch White trade from last year. Like people are really up in arms about that whole situation. White obviously got DFA'd to make room for Jordan Hicks here. But hey, look at a guy like Whit Merrifield, who they picked up from the Royals at the deadline last year. I mean, Whit Merrifield has been one of the best players in baseball over the span of the last month and a half.
True.
Snuck into the All-Star game, which was absolutely great to see. I think Ross Atkins has been doing a better job than a lot of people give him credit for. Again, look at the market, right? Instead of, it's funny, we think about hockey teams and how much pressure there are on NHL GMs in respective markets, right? Now you take all of that pressure from every market across Canada and you focus it in on one team and one organization. And that's what the Toronto Blue Jays are facing as the only Canadian team in the big leagues, right? So the pressure is massive, especially when you've got young guys like Vladdy and Bo and, a team that's on the precipice of a championship series win here.
See, but okay, so this is from a self-avowed Expos fan. So, yes, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when we say this is Canada's team. Still gets me mad. But yes, they would have not won in 94. If you're asking, Zach, I know they would have won in 94. I know that. But my point, I've talked to Atkins and, that Shapiro Atkins, it's got a bad taste in my mouth. I think it's Anthopoulos that got not the bulk of this team, but it got the framework, right? Yep. And these guys have got it to this precipice, which you mentioned, but this almost feels like year number 3 on the precipice. And, the pitching, some of the decisions on pitching, which they can't control. Guys are UFAs. They can sign where they want to sign. But, it just, for me as an outsider, I kind of feel like sometimes this team's half pregnant.
It absolutely is. It feels like it's been like this for a number of years with this team, right? You look at, 2015, 16, and what happened, and then how the Jays kind of fizzled out of relevance for a number of years afterwards. But it's been a slow burn for this team. It's been a slow burn for this franchise and this organization. And like a lot of people are up in arms about John Schneider still, and some of the decisions that he makes in terms of the bullpen and the arms and the pinch hits and all that sort of stuff. But again, this is a guy who's a fresh manager. This is his first full season of being a manager and a skipper in the major leagues, right? But in the same breath, and I said this on a radio show last week too, this is the guy who's come up with all of these kids, right? He's come up with the Romanos and the Bichettes and the Vladdies, and he seems to have a really, really, really great understanding of these guys and how they're playing and what they need. Take a look what's happened with Bo Bichette, right? He had a tremendous start to this season. He was one of the best players in the big leagues, goes to the All-Star game, comes back, and he's as flat as can be, right? In the series against the Dodgers, he doesn't start for the one game, which is a very rare occurrence for him. Comes in, pinch hits, has a nice hit. Now, all of a sudden, over the last 4, 5, 6 games since then, he's hitting like 350, right? Like he's turned it around so quickly. And I think a lot of that has to do with, a guy like John Schneider being able to talk to him and really understand him on a deep level. He's one of the most important players on this team. And I think, as much as people can sit there and be like, the bullpen stuff and rah, the stuff like the Bo Bichette thing, I think is ever more important, especially nowadays with the way that.
And that's Schneider. That's his fingerprint.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Absolutely. Right. Okay. So patience, that's the thing. But again, patience, how difficult that can be. Right. So
no, I'm giving you the prime example of it. Right. This is not my team. I look at it and I go, I thought you told me this, or I thought I heard this. And, I didn't like the way that administration came in.
Yeah.
I thought it was a little awkward, and it just, I don't know. Like, I'm worried that we're watching Vladdy Guerrero and Bo Bichette, kind of do the Johnny Gaudreau, Matt Tkachuk thing, right? I lived it here, first, right in front of me. And, we haven't even talked about Vladdy Guerrero. But you're closer to it than me. And I'm, if you're telling me John Schneider's got his fingerprints on it, that's great. That's the kind of inside knowledge I'm looking for, because it's so easy to look at, oh yeah, but he got into an argument with Chapman, right? Like he was getting yelled at and stuff like that's
that's the thing.
That's sports. Right?
You look at that though, right? Matt Chapman, a guy who's a veteran player who's been around the game for a long time, has a really deep understanding. What happened after that whole blow up? Well, Matt Chapman went out in his next plate appearance and drove one deep in a left field.
Right.
Got the Jays right back in the game. And then what happened in that whole series as a whole afterwards? Did Shohei get a single at bat anymore? They walked him all the time. Yep. And they were able to walk away with the series win out of it. So I think stuff like that is totally fine. And what you need from the veteran guys like Chapman too, right? The Jays need to be able to rely on their young players, but these older veteran guys like the Whit Merrifields, the Chapmans, the Brandon Belts, the Kevin Gosmans, the Chris Bassett's, these guys are so important to this team and this organization right now. And I think the whole Chapman, Schneider thing is just a perfect example of that.
Well, and I also think, we live in a different society now, right? Like that instantly becomes fodder for social media and John Boy, and everybody gets a crack at it. Yeah. But I think you and I would both agree, if this was 30 years ago and the cameras lingered on Joe Carter saying that, or Tony Fernandez saying that, or whoever, all of these exponential leaders that the Jays have always had, right? And that to me is exactly what Chapman was doing. Yep. I want to win, I'll take that it kind of brings me to Simeon in a way, and how he's been replaced because of what he brought to the team. And it sounds to me from what you're saying, it's more almost leadership by committee.
Absolutely. I think it is. I think it absolutely has been that way, right? I think Whit Merrifield's a guy who's been a great voice in that room for the team. Chapman, same sort of a thing, right? Like, Chapman's one of the best third basemen in all of baseball. I love watching him play out there and seeing stuff like him, getting fired up at the manager and stuff like that. I think it's a really, really good thing for this club. People have disagreements all the time, right? Like, we got to remember, this is a workplace, right? Everybody can relate to having a disagreement with your manager and maybe getting into an argument with your manager and clashing heads, and then coming out of that the next day being like, okay, now we're on a similar page. We have a better understanding of what's going on.
Sure.
So they walk Shohei Ohtani a bunch. Well, the Jays win the series. It worked, right? Yep. So I think, it's really easy because just how much attention and focus is on professional athletes and sports and baseball and hockey and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure there's been dozens and dozens and dozens of shouting matches and arguments behind closed doors over the course of the season that none of us are privy to. But with it being a public one, as you mentioned, the John Boys and the social media and everybody picks it up, and it's a story for sure.
All right, let's talk about Vladdy. I know a couple of years ago, it's seeming more and more like that when he was just hitting, home runs and leading the league and everything. It reminds me of the old NHL adage: is he a 20-goal scorer, or did he score 20 goals? Is he going to lead the league in home runs, or did he lead the league in home runs?
Yeah.
How do you assess Vladdy? He's the top young prospect, or no, he's not even a prospect, but you know what I'm saying. He's the top player on this team. Absolutely. The expectations are there. In this particular season, 2023, how would you assess him?
I think he's been having a fine season. I think if you look at his numbers, his offensive
professional, describe it as professional? Like a
professional baseball season. I think that's a great way to put it, Rob. I do. Yeah. Look, this is a guy, again, who has all of the spotlight on him and has had the spotlight on him for a number of years. His father was Vladimir Guerrero, who was a legend in baseball, a legend in Canadian baseball, just, one of the best sluggers of his day. So the expectations were so massive on Junior coming into the major leagues. And, he had the one amazing season. But I almost wonder if we have to rethink the way we think about Vladdy in a sense, right? I think everybody thinks of Vladdy and they're like, well, why isn't he leading the league in home runs? Why doesn't he have the best OPS in baseball? Why is he, swinging on pitches outside of the zone on a regular basis? Why can't he just take a damn walk for once?
Yeah.
And, I think we almost have to rethink the fact of him being this super mega elite baseball talent, just being like a really, really great high-end baseball player. like an elite first baseman, right? He's a Gold Glove winner defensively. That was great to see from him last year.
And that's kind of incredible when you think of where he came from, right?
It is. It
Yeah.
absolutely is,
Yeah.
right? It absolutely is. He's a tremendous player. He's a tremendous piece of this organization and a very important piece of this organization. But I think everybody looks at him as the guy who, led the league in home runs and OPS and all that sort of stuff a couple of years ago. I'm just not sure if he's that guy. Now, again, doesn't mean that he's a bad baseball player in any sense of the term. He's a very high-end elite talent, but I think people's expectations are leading the league in home runs instead of, just being a damn good player.
Well, 20 years ago, I watched Sammy Sosa hit 60, but the Cubs did nothing. I watched Barry Bonds hit 70, and the Giants did nothing. Like, to your point, like Dinger, sure. Chicks dig the long ball. I get that part. My apologies to anybody I just offended, but that old analogy. But I still go back to the fact that, like, it's a minor miracle this guy is a Gold Glove winner. When you think about how out of shape he was and how that was the big thing. Well, he's got a DH. That's all he'll ever do. Now, and that's why I go back to professional. He wants to win. That's how I see it. He just wants to win.
Absolutely. And, you got to remember, too, that, a couple of years ago, the Jays traded away Rowdy Tellez to the Brewers to make space for Vladdy at first base.
Right.
They committed to this guy years ago. And Rowdy Tellez is having a fine career in Milwaukee as a slugger over there. He would have been a damn fine first baseman for the Toronto Blue Jays today. But this is a guy that the Jays have absolutely married themselves to up to this point, right? Now, of course, the big question that remains is, well, what happens with Vladdy's future? Do the Jays view him as a $30 million player, or do they view him as a $20 million player? Same sort of a thing with Bo Bichette. You look what happened with him just signing that sort of short-term bridge deal through his arbitration years here, right? I think it's going to change. Like, a lot can change over the next couple of years here, right? So it'll be interesting to see the way the Jays, view Vladdy in contract negotiations moving forward and all that sort of stuff. But just dialing it back to this season, I think he's started to turn things around a little bit here as well. He's looking a little bit more calm and a little bit more patient. I think that's the biggest thing for him. I think there's a lot of pressure on him. I think he always feels like he needs to try and hit every single ball over the wall. Yeah. He needs to, in my eyes, just play a little bit more small ball, play a little more money ball. Just get on first. Just take the walk. Don't swing at the pitch on the outside. Just wait for your pitches and let it go from there. And I think some of that pressure maybe at times has gone to him over the last couple of years.
And as a team as a whole, they're better at that this year than they've been in a while.
They are. I think that's something that we've seen as an overall improvement, right? Yeah. I mean, we also got to remember that, there's a guy named George Springer who's gone 0 for 28 in his last 28 appearances at the plate. Yeah. Like, he's a guy who is a huge part of this offense. The lineups just dropped recently, and Springer's not even starting today. He's out of the lineup. But then there's a guy like Whit Merrifield, who we talked about a little bit earlier, who's sliding up into the number one spot in the batting order and doing fine with it, right? So there's just so many moving parts right now. But the guys like Vladdy are guys that, the Jays absolutely need to be able to rely on to provide offense. And he's got the third best OPS of any Blue Jays player this year. So evidently something's going right for him.
We started off talking a little bit about the deal that the Jays made yesterday. I just want to go back to that. Okay, so they added a reliever. And actually, it's my fault because we got off on the Shapiro and Atkins. Okay. What else do they need, Zach, in your mind? What else, what would be a successful trade deadline for this club?
Well, the talk about 2 weeks ago was Marcus Stroman and starting pitching, right? So many people were like, wow, Marcus Stroman, that'd be so cool to bring him back. Yeah, it would have been great. But, a lot of people forgot about the fact that Hyun-Jin Ryu has returned from his Tommy John surgery, and now the Jays are rolling with a 6-man rotation, right? Yeah. So everybody gets a little bit insulated right now, which is great for the Alek Manoahs of the world at the moment, right? Who's another guy I'm sure we could spend an hour talking about.
I don't even know where to start.
Where do you start, right? Yeah. So, a lot of the talk is, well, Marcus Stroman starting pitching, not going to happen. Not going to happen. Bullpen, started to see that being addressed, right? Genesis Cabrera comes in 10 days ago. Jordan Hicks comes in yesterday. I would like them to see them add another arm to the bullpen.
Okay.
I think the more depth that you can have, the better right now. You know,
Mhm.
you got guys like Yimi Garcia and Eric Swanson who have played high leverage situations all season long. Both of them are career high innings. Yimi just earned a huge bonus for his innings pitched over the course of this last weekend here.
Yeah.
So I think another bullpen arm would be great. And they need another batter too, right? So you're probably looking at a middle infielder, platoon player, somebody who can hit well against lefties. I was really banging the drum for a while about Cody Bellinger because
Mhm.
you know he can be another great guy in the outfielder. His offensive numbers this year have been tremendous. Best season offensively he's had since his MVP year in 2019. But, you know, the Cubs have decided they're not going to trade him or Stroman, and that's fine, as is their right.
Yep.
There's a number of guys that are available right now. I think there's a lot of talk about a guy like Tommy Pham and Mark Canha from the New York Mets, as they appear to be, you know, sellers right now in the marketplace. There's been some talk about Tim Anderson from Chicago as a potential kind of like Whit Merrifield 2.0. I'm not entirely sold on that one. Got guys like Lane Thomas from the Nationals, but the thing with Lane Thomas is you know they're selling him as an everyday player, and I don't think a lot of teams around the league view acquiring him as like him to be an everyday player.
Sure.
Brett Rooker out in Oakland, another good name, and then you got an old friend in Teoscar Hernandez, who's apparently available.
I saw that, yeah,
as well, right? So there's a lot of options right now for the Jays. I think they add a bat or two, and I'd like to see him add another bullpen arm, as I said.
We talked about Baltimore, whether they would or they wouldn't. Tampa doesn't strike me as ever a real, threat to go out and make big deals. I don't know. I'm kind of curious. What do you think the Yankees or the Bo Sox might do?
Well, it's actually interesting you mentioned Tampa. As we started talking here, they went out and traded for Aaron Seravalli from the Cleveland Guardians.
Well, of course. Okay, so make me look like an idiot.
But
there you go. All right.
They've added another arm to their rotation, right?
Okay.
Which is probably a good thing for them, something they're going to undoubtedly need. You know, I think Yankees fans might be in for a rude awakening when they start selling off in the next 24 hours here. I mean, with the situation with Aaron Judge right now in his toe, you know, he's out for a month and a half. He comes back, he plays on Saturday, and then they have him out of the lineup yesterday, and everybody's like, what's going on here? Like, I just don't see the Yankees or Boston really being a threat here through the rest of the season. And now, of course, watch them, you know, go on a resurgence here because I've jinxed them or something like that. But, you know,
but it is odd, isn't it, to see them at the bottom of the table?
It's so strange. You look at the way that they've been for the last decade.
Well, both of them at the bottom of the table.
Absolutely. Right. But yeah, it's a bit of a changing of guard, I think, right, in this division. So, you know, it's really the Jays for the taking here. Like, it really feels like it's the Jays for the taking. And I think the organization sees that as well. And I think that's why they were willing to spend on a guy like Jordan Hicks, who will undoubtedly make them better.
Let's leave the Jays. Let's leave the trade deadline. Tell me about Shohei Ohtani. We just saw him come through Toronto. I think it was last week. He's right now, you know, everybody goes, well, he hits home runs. No, he leads Major League Baseball in home runs. He pitched whatever it was, and then in the doubleheader, and then came back and hit 2 home runs in the next game. I never thought in my lifetime I would see this. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. We've seen, you know, you're old enough to remember when, you know, guys might pitch 10 complete games in a year. Now we might not have 10 complete games in Major League Baseball.
That was Shohei. That game, the first game of the doubleheader against Detroit, was Shohei's first complete game of his career.
That's a first complete game of his career.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, right. So the way the game has changed is incredible.
Yeah.
I don't think it's outrageous to say that he's the best baseball player of all time right now. I mean, he does everything, Rob. He does everything. He's the best starting pitcher, and he's the best slugger in the league. You've never seen a player like this. We've never seen a player like this.
Right.
You know, and people can go back and say, oh, yeah, well, Babe Ruth, you know, he was a pitcher and he was a slugger, but he wasn't a pitcher and a slugger at the same time. And, you know, Babe Ruth was, you know.
That's a really interesting point that you make. That's very significant for people, right? Because that's always the de facto. Well, Babe Ruth did it. Not exactly this way.
He did it, but he didn't quite do it, right? And no disrespect to Babe Ruth and anybody who played in those years of baseball, but, you know, a lot of these guys were like plumbers in the offseason.
That's right.
Like, could you imagine, you know, Babe Ruth seeing Shohei Ohtani come to the mound and throw a splitter at him? I mean, he'd be be dropping his drawers, right? So,
Right.
I think he's the best baseball player of all time because he can do everything. And what happens next is going to be absolutely fascinating. I'm a little surprised the Angels have decided to hold on to them because I don't know how married Shohei is to that market right now, especially given the fact the Angels have been just sputtering for years with him there, right?
But could that be insight, Zach?
Could be.
That be insight to it?
Could be, right? It absolutely could be. But in the same breath, I'll give the Angels, a lot of credit here. They have made some moves recently to show him that they want him to stay and they want to win, right?
Yep.
Losing Mike Trout to that hand injury a couple of weeks ago was devastating for them, right? Because they were playing some great ball. They were in a great spot in the standings, and they've sputtered since then, which is going to happen when you lose one of the best, center fielders in the game, right? But with the due credit, Mike Moustakas pickup has been looking solid so far for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Grichuk and CJ Cron, I don't know how big of needle movers they are at this point in their respective careers, but they're going to help, that's for sure. Tough losing Taylor Ward.
Grichuk's a good guy, though, right? Like, Grichuk's a good teammate, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was a great guy. Like, and even back in Toronto, that was one of his biggest sort of pluses.
Right.
As inconsistent as he was a guy that the team and the players really liked, right? They picked up Lucas Giolito and Ronaldo Lopez, too, helped shore up their starting pitching a little bit, another arm for the bullpen. It wouldn't surprise me to see them be active again, picking up more pieces over the next 24 hours here, or 26 hours, however long
whatever it is,
deadline now, right?
Yeah.
But I think they obviously, I think they want to keep him, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they were at this point thinking, there's a chance he could leave, they probably would have traded him and gotten one of the biggest hauls ever in a return in a baseball trade, right? The inherent risk that they're taking is massive, right? They're risking losing Shohei Ohtani for nothing this offseason.
Well, remember who you're talking to. You're talking to somebody from Calgary. I've lived this movie. You said something a couple seconds ago. We kind of bounced off a bit. Best player ever. In the modern lexicon of sport, though, in the modern conversation of sport, does he need to win to have that title? Does he have to be a World Series champion to have that title?
I don't think so. Like, I think, I don't know. It's hard, right? It's really hard. I totally understand the idea of having, the World Series championships or the Stanley Cups or, whatever title you want to make it, right?
Right.
But how often do we see in professional sports one player completely willing the rest of their team to a championship win? I think that's.
I think he used to. I mean, it's funny. I was talking about that with the Eskimos, right? Like, 5 in a row. That's the dynasty, and now we've had to restructure what a dynasty is.
Absolutely.
But Tom Brady's the greatest that ever played because he's got the championships to go with it. Michael Jordan, LeBron James. To me, it's not even the best all time, but is he that kind of legendary player that 10, 20, 30 years from now, we're talking about Shohei Ohtani in that same way? I don't know how many of those guys we talk about that don't, in that same regard as Gretzky or Lemieux or Messier, that don't have titles. And it's not his fault. Like, it's probably the sport that it's the least his fault. Right.
And that's the thing, right? That's the thing, because there's so many more moving parts in baseball than there are in other sports in my eyes. And I think that's kind of one of the big separators here for a guy like Shohei. He will undoubtedly go down as the greatest or one of the greatest players of all time. Championships be damned. The things that he's done on the field are unique to any player who's ever stepped on the baseball field. For that reason, I think he's going to go down as one of the greatest players of all time. If he wants to further cement his legacy as the undoubted, unquestioned number one player of all time, then absolutely he's going to need to win at some point. But I am of the mindset, like, I'm of a more modern mindset when it comes to evaluating players on a grand scale, right? Okay. Because I view sports so much as team components nowadays. There's the team component of sports is so much different than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago, as you mentioned, right? Where one player could will a franchise to victory. Tom Brady is kind of the exception to the rule in the last 20 years, right? I mean, how many times did we see the New England Patriots have like nobody that he's throwing the ball to? And it's just like,
exactly.
Who the hell are these guys?
Yeah.
Tom Brady was that good to be able to have done that, right? That's why he's the greatest football player of all time, right? But I just don't think I don't think we see that anymore in sports, like even with like you look at like the NHL, for example, and the Vegas Golden Knights, right? Still a little bit bitter about this because of course I write for Oilers Nation as well here.
Sure.
So I had a front row seat to everything that happened. As great as Jack Eichel was in the playoffs, Jonathan Marchessault also had a tremendous playoffs. Aiden Hill was playing some incredible hockey, and the defensemen had all stepped up to roles that were well above what they normally are, right? So, and you can go back and look at any of the number of recent Stanley Cup champions, even the most recent NHL dynasty, so to speak, of the Tampa Bay Lightning. They weren't just one guy, right? They've had a lot of really, really high-end talent.
It's true. No, it's true.
I think with a guy like Shohei, I'm comfortable saying he's the greatest baseball player of all time and will be solely because of the fact that he just does so many things on the field we've just never seen before. I don't know if we'll ever see again.
I am digging this conversation, by the way, absolutely digging this conversation. So let me throw this odd one out at you.
Okay.
Is he going to give the World Baseball Classic credibility that it never had before? Because the problem is, in a lot of people's mind, is he's never had the big stage. He had the big stage there, right?
Yeah.
He had, if he never gets to a World Series, or if the Angels stay the Angels and he never makes a playoff, what's the biggest game he was ever? What was the biggest? But that game in which he faces Trout, right? That might be, and it could be the biggest stage we ever saw him on, which then gives the World Baseball Classic extra credibility, does it not?
It absolutely does, and it absolutely should give it the credibility because the World Baseball Classic is the World Baseball Classic. It's not the Major League, World Classic. It is players from all over the world, and you look at like the Team Japan, a great example. How many of those players were from the Japanese league, right? That played in there. Guys like Murataka Murakami, for example, who had a tremendous showing out there. Guys who will never play in the major leagues. The collection of talent from all around the world could absolutely be enough to elevate Shohei to that conversation right now. But again, the thing is that people are such truthers about their one league and their one sport that, for some, they'll be like, the hell, that doesn't matter. He didn't do it in the World Series, But yeah, it's a great point, Rob. I never really kind of thought about that, but it absolutely could be enough to elevate him to that level, when we're sitting back 20 years. And hopefully over the next 20 years, Shohei can go and win 2 or 3 rings, and we never even have to worry about any of this stuff or any of this kind of conversation. But it's sure a fun one to have. That's for sure.
So, and the other part of this is fascinating. I spent a lot of my time in youth sports, and I'm really, I love kids playing multiple sports and things like this. And, part of baseball really drags me down is that, it's so specialized and so, we don't, pitch long or complete games, all those sort of things. Is there a JUCO coach or a high school coach that is giving second thought to talking some kid who's coming into their program who can pitch and hit and say, you know what, you got to pick one, which is what we've always had to do or which we've done. Is Shohei Ohtani giving pause for second thought to allow others to follow in this path?
Well, I surely hope so. I surely hope so because, I grew up as a young athlete who played multi-sports, and it was the cross training of different sports was crucial to each sport.
Right.
I grew up playing football. That was my main sport. I did Olympic weightlifting as my second sport. Mm-hmm. And the power and the strength that I gained from the lifting helped me so much on the football field. And the agility skills that I learned on the football field helped me in the other aspect. I think in baseball, it's the perfect sport where you can kind of allow something like that to happen. I don't think we'll ever see a Deion Sanders again, right? Where, like multi-sport or playing offense and defense on a football field. But I think
I think the multi-sport one would be the hard part, right?
Oh, it would be so hard. I think a league like baseball, though, is the perfect example for it. Maybe one day we'll see like a hybrid who's, instead of a starting pitcher, maybe he's a closing pitcher. Maybe he's a closer and an elite bat like Shohei is, or or
Yeah.
something like that. The possibilities are endless. But I really hope it does give pause to some coaches along the way and allow some of these players, if they are these really high-end talents, to kind of grow and learn and develop more. And, then when they get up in the college ranks and stuff like that, you never know what can happen, because, even now we still see college players that are two-way players in college ball, right? So I think we are absolutely getting to a point in sports where, we could start to see more Shoheis, because, just you look at the name brand, the recognition, what he's done. How can kids growing up sit there not wanting to be Shohei Ohtani, right? I mean, it's incredible.
It is, and it's
Incredible.
fun, right? Like, it's fun. That's the other part of it. It's fun.
Yep.
And so often we beat the fun out of sports, right? Like, I don't know about you. I don't know where you sit on the home run jacket, but I loved it. Like, but I would tune into the traditional, the Bob McCowans and all of those guys, and you can't do that. Yeah. But they're showing, again, it's back to Matt Chapman. Show me some reality. Give me reality here.
The Jays have lost so much of their vibes from the last couple of years with stuff like that. Like guys like that was the thing too, with losing a guy like Teoscar Hernandez and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. They were so much fun.
Yes.
They brought so much fun to the sport.
Yes.
At the end of the day, yes, this is billion-dollar industry and giant contracts are being handed out left, right, and center. But at the end of the day, this is a sport. And aren't sports meant to be fun? Isn't that what all of this is about?
Zach Laing, you were a saint. Absolutely. That's what we should be talking about.
Look at the Baltimore Orioles, for example. We're talking about them earlier again, right? What is their home run celebration this year? The guys put water in their mouths and stand on the edge of the dugout and squirt water out of their mouths like they're sprinklers.
Yep.
Like, that is fun,
Yep.
Like I don't know.
I love the storm front in Carolina. I love all that stuff.
Storm surge, it's so good.
Storm surge, yeah, right.
Yeah, like, it's so good. And I still remember when Don Cherry was on the air calling them a bunch of jerks for doing it. Yeah. It's it's crazy. And I think that's the beauty of sport as a whole, though, because you can have the people like the Bob McCowans or the Don Cherrys who are like, this is ridiculous, and why is this happening? But then you have this newer, younger generation, or this other generation, rather, who are the complete opposite. And the beauty of it is we can all get to sit here for hours and talk until we're red in the faces about which way it should be and which is the right way. And I don't know if there's necessarily a true answer on either side of it either, right? But I do think that, the vibes were kind of lost this year with the Jays, and I don't know. Hopefully it's something that can recover a little bit here, because, I think this is a team that is inherently kind of a loose team in a sense, right? Look at a guy like Vladdy. He loves giving guys ice baths. Like, it's hilarious. And stuff like that, you need to have that, because I think, especially from a team sport element too, it's a long season. 162
games.
It is crazy how long the season is. If you are spending every single day being like cutthroat serious about it, you're not going to last. No, you're just not going to last, right?
You can't.
You can't.
So we're about to begin the most important month, I think, in baseball, which is August. Yeah. September has its own, with expanded rosters, et cetera, et cetera. But August this is where you separate the wheat and the chaff. Who do you like in the American? Who do you like in the National? Who's everybody? I know statistically who we're chasing, but it's like you said, like, nobody's been better in baseball than Merrifield since July 1st. I mean, the Jays have been one of the best teams. Who do you like turning the corner into August?
I don't know. Like, it's really hard to get a feel on things right now. The AL Central, you can pretty much just punt that entire division right now. I mean, they're a disaster top to bottom. I do, maybe a little bit of homerism here, but I do really like the position that Toronto's found themselves in right now.
I like it too. They haven't gone on a run yet, right?
They haven't. Their longest winning streak of the year is 6 games, and that was back in late April. That's not really a lot in baseball terms, right?
No.
Their schedule here moving forward through the rest of the month is pretty soft too. Let me just pull it up really quickly.
Sure.
So they play 9 series here in August: Baltimore, Boston, Cleveland, Chicago Cubs, Phillies, Reds, Orioles again, Guardians again, and the Washington Nationals. That's a pretty nice schedule to go through here.
Could be
August. It could be. On paper, it's a nice looking schedule.
And isn't that kind of the recent trials and tribulations of this team, is that those are the schedules that they don't take advantage of?
It's so true. It's absolutely true. It's been a huge issue for them, right? But again, even over the last 2 or 3 weeks here, their starting pitching has been among the best in baseball.
Mhm.
They're one of the best. Their WRC plus is among the best in the big leagues. So, they are a team that is surging right now. And I wrote about that today in an article that's going to be going up on BlueJaysNation.com after we finish up here.
Okay.
So I do like Toronto coming out of the AL here. There's some other good teams in there. Texas, really fascinated to see what happens with them. But again, Texas 3-7 in their last 10, they're sputtering. Houston, they're only 6-4 in their last 10. The Angels, they could be a team to watch, absolutely here. Heading over to the NL, that's where things get really fascinating. Who's going to beat the Atlanta Braves in the playoffs? I mean, that's $1 million question right there. I mean, their offense has been absolutely insane this year. I truly think that the Braves are the team to beat from the NL this season. Cincinnati, they're an absolute wild card. I'm fascinated to see what they
led
do.
by an absolute wild card in Joey Votto.
Right? Yeah, absolutely, right.
Talking about guys, we were just talking about fun in sport. Who's better than Joey Votto right now?
Oh, he's awesome. He's awesome. And you look at the way that Cincinnati started playing after Votto got healthy this year too. They were already a team that was surging, and then Votto's just been able to help take them over the top. They got so many good young rookies this year. Matt McClain, Senzel, Spencer Steer. Look at Ellie De La Cruz. He's having a little bit more of a welcome to the show kid realization over the last couple of weeks here. But
that happens.
He's electric, right?
Yeah.
I'm also fascinated by a team like the Giants right now, right? Similar in a sense, right? A younger team have this real big surge, but they've really sputtered again over the last number of weeks here. This is a really tight season. This feels just like a really, really tight season all around right now. And I think, as you mentioned, this is the most important month really in baseball. So,
good for the sport,
it's
right?
tremendous
for
the sport.
Yeah,
it's tremendous. And this is the time of the year where, the boys are separated from the men, so to speak. Right. So it's going to be really fascinating, but I'm elated. I'm so excited for this next month of baseball here.
You alluded to it. Tell us a little bit about what's going on at Blue Jays Nation. What can we find? What's going on?
Tons. If anybody listening isn't reading BJN on a daily basis, you need to be. We have been investing a lot into the team that we have over there this season. We've just got a tremendous group of writers and content creators right now. Tons of articles every single day coming out. I myself take care of the game day blogs, so those go up a couple hours before every game. Just a synopsis of what's happening that day for the Blue Jays, what happened the day before. Take a look at the standings, the odds, the lineups, all those sorts of good things. So yeah, tons of stuff going on there right now. So it's the place to be if you're looking to get anything on Blue Jays baseball. Just for example, picking up Jordan Hicks yesterday, one of our writers, Nick Prasad, used to actually be a scout for the Toronto Blue Jays a number of years ago. Had some great insight from a scout's perspective as to what the Jays are getting in Jordan Hicks and stuff like that. One of the things he was mentioning about with Hicks was talking about how he's a guy who actually will change his delivery of his pitches on a regular basis. So sometimes he'll come in with a high leg kick. Sometimes he'll have a quicker delivery. Typically he's throwing out of like a 3/4 arm slot, but he can also switch it up and come over the top against opposing pitchers. So some great insight from a guy like him. Brendan Delaney, one of our other writers, tons of great stuff on the prospects throughout the Jays system. So yeah, if you're looking to get any additional knowledge about the Jays, that's the place to head to right now.
Well, this has been brilliant. I hope you'll do us the honor of coming back as the season wears on, because I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. It's nice and refreshing.
Likewise, Rob. I'd love to come back on anytime. Anytime you guys need somebody to talk some Jays ball.
Oh, well, and again, they're not going away, so we're going to need that.
Absolutely.
Zach, we encourage everybody to go follow you and check out Blue Jays Nation. But thank you for doing this. This was such a fun conversation. I look forward to our next one.
Yeah, it was. Likewise. Thanks for having me.
There you go. Zach Laing from Blue Jays Nation. We will get him back. Man, did I love that Shohei Ohtani conversation. I love that stuff. By the way, brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary. You don't accent now. It's going to be 77 here right away. And then it'll be 80. And then, I don't want to date anybody, but it's going to get to 100 real quick. 4 locations in Calgary in the winter. None right now, but 4 locations in Calgary during the winter. That's who you want to check out. That's who you need to trust when you're heading to the slopes. Who has it better than us? Nobody has it better than us. We've got the mountains right next door. Friday's show have been talking about this, really excited about it. It's my program, so I get to do what I want. I get a lot of questions about volunteering. We're doing a show on Friday. We're going to have 6 different organizations. They're going to come in. They're going to tell you what they're doing. Most of them are in the sports side. And if you want to volunteer, if you have a kid that wants to volunteer, if you know somebody who wants to volunteer, this is the show. They'll tell you what they do, how they do it, and who they need. And if it's for you, perfect. We are the city of volunteers. This is the legacy of the 88 games. When I talk about the Dreamers, when I talk about the Frank Kings of the world, this city volunteers like nobody's business. And we're going to do a show. We've got some great, there's some programs that you've never heard of that we're going to talk to that you're going to want to be part of. So go tell it to everybody you know. Let them know. We're all going to hunker down around the AM radio. Oh, no, I guess it's not the AM radio anymore. We're all going to hunker down the computer and listen to Rob and his podcast on Friday. No podcast next Monday because of the long weekend. And then 1 week from Friday, you know him, you love him, is the vice president of retail for Calgary Sports Entertainment Corporation and my best friend, Brent Gibbs. SmackDown. SmackDown is in Calgary on Friday, August 11th. We are doing a big SmackDown show. I'm not promising any guests, although I'm not promising any guests, but we will preview SmackDown. We will get into what we are going to wear that night because we have a new CDC outfit to wear that night. So that's coming up on the 11th. So the big volunteer show coming up here right around the corner. Let's head to the final mile. I am so damn proud of this city and the people that have built it, but we lost one. Want to recognize Nick Petros from Nick's. Everybody knows Nick's. You're a Calgarian. You've been there. It's right across the street on Crowchild from McMahon Stadium. Pizza and steak the way it's supposed to be done. Nick passed away here recently. His family put this out yesterday. I don't know Nick. Seen him, shook his hand once, but I don't need that connection. I know he was Calgary. I know he was part of this community. I know the Jay McNeils of the world went over and had dinner at Nick's. I know John Huffnagel and Dave Dickinson and Tom Higgins and Wally Buono and Stan Schwartz and Ron Rook and all of the other legends that went through the doors of McMahon Stadium as office workers, as players, as coaches and officials. They went over there. Nick knew them. I know Bob Nicholson from Hockey Canada. He used to go. Bob Nicholson and I had lunch a couple of times over at Nick's, and he knew Nick. It's the exact same as Spolumbos. It's the exact same as all of these other haunts that to be Calgarian, you have to go. We have this great Salim and Julian and all these new young professional broadcasters and writers and stuff that are coming to cover the Calgary sport. And to get it indoctrinated into Calgary, they go to places like Spolumbos. They go to places like Nick's. You go into Nick's Steakhouse and it's a museum of Calgary. It's sad today. It's sad. So my thoughts and my prayers to Nick's family, my thoughts and prayers to Nick's staff and customers. But it's important that we all remember that he's a Calgarian. He was a proud Calgarian. He was part of the fabric of what makes his city great. So we celebrate Nick and Nick's Steakhouse. So if you haven't been over there in a while, make sure you go down unsolicited. Just, this is my city and these are the people in my city and I protect my city. And I stand up for my city and I promote my city. And I did that on the weekend and I'm doing it right now. Back to the beginning of the show, which was an absolute cluster. And so, okay, all those in charge or all those responsible, raise your hand. So here's the deal. Poor young RJ gets this show, and then RJ, you got to do this, and RJ, you got to do that, and then I'm sitting here going, well, why doesn't it work? Because I got in RJ's face, told him what to do. I started plugging things in and pushing buttons that I shouldn't have pushed. So my apologies and my profound, I know better, RJ. So poor RJ gets this assignment.
That's not you, Rob.
That's not me. It's not me at all.
I'm gonna call out.
No,
Dell right now.
You don't call anything. It's my fault. My apologies to you, sir. You've done a fine job over the last couple of shows. I'll just two things as we go. One, again, congratulations to the Calgary Surge playoff game coming up on Sunday. Make sure you get a ticket for that. And I know I talked a little bit about it before, but I'm really, really worried about football, brackets, soccer in our country. There's so much amazing potential. There's so many amazing players. There's so many people. Carlo Bruno has come into Calgary, minor soccer Calgary. I get them mixed up, but I think it's minor soccer Calgary. And he's done an amazing job. And I love what they're doing. Tommy Wheeldon Jr., love what Tommy's done. I mean, Tommy coaches in a league that I'm frustrated with because of a deal that they did to get going. I get that. I understand that. It's context, it's continuity, it's all those sort of things. But to watch Christine Sinclair go out this way is devastating. That woman has done more for sport in this country than anybody in the last 2 decades. I'm not saying women's sport. I'm saying sport. We are not a soccer nation without her. She grabbed and took this country by the collar, and she deserves better than what happened today. Today is sport. This is what happens. You play the games, crap happens. Part of me, and one day when I figure out how to properly articulate this, when I can come on the radio and have this conversation and everybody goes, oh, that's right, I understand what he's saying, I will drop this microphone and I will never be heard from again. I will walk into the woods and that will be the end of me. Part of today is good. Losing sucks. The situation that soccer in our country finds itself in sucks. The lack of leadership sucks. There's a lot of sucking going on here. But part of this is good. The part of this is good is that we care. The part of this that is good is that we stop and say this sucks. The part of this says we got up early and watched this. 50 years ago, we weren't doing it. 40 years ago, we weren't doing it. 30 years ago, we weren't doing it. 20 years ago, we weren't doing it. 10 years ago, we started, some of us, and we were trying to get everybody else to do it. But today we did it. I go back to this team winning gold at the Olympics. That is a top 3 sports moment for me all time. Men, women, kids, adults, doesn't matter. And I know that I'm not articulating this correctly, and I know that people don't understand that. But we have to sometimes understand the importance and the role that losing plays. Losing gives value to winning. And we won the Olympics. I would grant you there isn't a purist of football that would say, I'd rather win the Olympics than the World Cup. I get that. I understand that. No problem. No problem. But that was a huge national accomplishment for us. That never happens without Christine Sinclair. And Christine Sinclair goes out on her shield today. Being a leader, will always be a leader. And I think one of the greatest Canadians of all time in sports, one of the greatest on-field leaders in sport all time. I hope she has another chapter. I beg of her. She owes this country nothing. Christine Sinclair should be able to go and do whatever she wants. Nobody should question anything. If she wants to, play a few more years in Portland and then go away and never be heard from again, she has earned that right. But I hope from the bottom of my heart that Christine Sinclair feels like she still has one more fight, and that is to clean up and get soccer in this country, football in this country, in the right direction. With that said, my apologies again to RJ and everybody off the front end. You won't hear it on the podcast. So you're going to go, what's Rob doing again? Don't worry about it. It's the same old as I did before. Friday, big volunteer show. 2 weeks from Friday will be Brent Gibbs and the SmackDown show. Barn Burner guys are actually in studio tomorrow, which is miraculous. I think it's a court order thing. But they'll have some programming for you. We're back Friday. Have a great couple of days, folks. Make sure you check out Zach Lang, Blue Jays Nation. He was a terrific guest for us. We'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody.